Our next presentation is continues with the Italian theme somewhat, and Carolyn Snelling is going to talk to us about Florence Nightingale's letters from Egypt.
Hello, I'm Carolyn. Welcome to Vienna. I'm not going to speak about them because I'm not an intellectual, but I'm going to read 3 passages from Florence Nightingale's letters to her family, letters she sent from Egypt when she was there, when she was 29 years old. Rather impressionistic. She has a fascination, but they're not deep at all. Okay. The beauty of Cairo. No one ever talks about the beauty of Cairo, ever gives you the least idea of this surpassing city. I thought it was a place to buy stores at and pass through on one's way to India, instead of it being the rose of cities, the garden of the desert, the pearl of the Moorish architecture, the fairest, really the fairest place of earth below. It reminds me always of Sirius. I can't tell why, except that Sirius has the silveriest light in heaven above, and Cairo has the same radiant look on earth below. I shall never look at Sirius in future years without thinking of her. Oh, could I but describe those Moorish streets in red and white stripes of marble, the latticed balconies with little octagonal shrines, also latticed, sticking out of them for the ladies to look straight down through. The innumerable mosques and minarets, the arcades in the insides of houses you peep into, the first stories meeting almost overhead. And yet the air with nothing but fragrance on it, in the narrowest of narrow nines and little alleyways. But there are no words to describe an Arabian city, no European words at least, for that one day yesterday you would have thought it worthwhile to make a voyage 3 times as long as the one we made, and 10 times as disagreeable, and go back again content, well content. Where the Nile flows. From the terrace of the mosque is, I should imagine, the finest view in the whole world. Cairo, which is immense, lies at the feet. A forest of minarets and domes and towers. The Nile flows his solemn course beyond the waters being still out. It's now High Nile. And the 3 pyramids stand sharp against the sky. Here, Osiris and his worshippers lived. Here, Abraham and Moses walked. Here, Aristotle came. Here, later, Muhammad learned the best of his religion and studied Christianity. Here, perhaps, our Saviour's mother brought her little son to open his eyes to the light. They're all gone from the body, but the Nile flows and the pyramids still stand there. The withered desert. Yesterday and today, having no wind, we've taken long walks into the eastern Arabian desert to look at quarries and catacombs. The impression which the desert makes is ever new, ever conceivable. Inconceivable. The oftener you're astonished at it, the more like a stranger, a mysterious power it seems. If I were to attempt to describe it, you would not feel the more acquainted with it. I myself, while I am floating along in our smooth Parthenope by the soft twilight, can hardly conceive it. It's not the absence of life, but the death of life which makes it so terrible. Of life which has been. The solitary catacomb, the painted rock temple, and the distant strip of green along the Nile testify. A lifeless desert would be far less frightful than this dead desert. The idea perpetually recurring of an awful devil at work, making his kingdom his own, overwhelming everything by some monstrous convulsion. Perhaps it is the contrast of the sky with the earth which makes the terror of the desert. If it were overspread with a dull, lifeless sky like ours, it would seem less unnatural. At least one would not see its terrors so plainly as when glared upon by such a light as this. But while the earth in our country is rich and variegated with light and crowded with animation, the sky above contrasts by its deadness. Here, on the other hand, the sky is radiant. The light is living, the golden light which seems to pour not only from the sky, but from all points of the transparent blue heavens. You look down and the ungrateful earth lies there, hopeless and helpless, a dying, withered desert. You almost fancy you hear the devil laughing as he dares even almighty power to bring forth bread. This is what gives you a supernatural, mysterious feeling in Egypt. The looks naturally turn to the sky when the earth has no beauty. But we desire it, and we see the heavens are full of beauty. The struggle between God and the devil is perpetually, visibly before one's thoughts, for the earth seems the abode of the devil and the heavens of God. That's my brief on. I've got another piece, but tell me about the time.
You've got, well, our final speakers will be speaking for 20 minutes, so yes. I think you've got a little bit longer. Would anybody else, I personally would love to hear your next contribution.
The next is an extract from a book by Harriet Martineau. So it's rather different, much more analytical, and it's an extract from Eastern Life. It's still about the Nile, but it's a different approach, different way of thinking. The title is The Unseen World. From the beginning, the people of Egypt have had everything to hope from the river, nothing from the desert, much to fear from the desert, and little from the river. What their fear may reasonably be, anyone may know who looks upon a hillocky expanse of sand, where the little jerboa burrows and the hyena prowls by night. Under the hillocks lie temples and palaces. Under the level sands, a whole city. The enemy has come in from behind and stifled and buried it. What is the hope of the people from the river anyone may witness who, at the regular season, sees the people grouped on the eminences, watching the advancing waters and listening for the voice of the choir and listening for the boom of the cannon, which is to tell the prospect of the inundation of the year. Who can estimate the effect on a nation's mind and on the character of a perpetual vigilance against the desert, and of an annual mood of hope in regard of the Nile? We cannot see. Who cannot see what a stimulating and enlivening influence this periodical anxiety and relief must exercise on the character of a nation? And then there's the effect on their ideas and beliefs. The Nile was naturally deified by the ancient inhabitants. It was a god to the mass, and at least one of the manifestations of deity to the priestly class. It was the immediate cause of all they had and all they hoped for, and the creative power regularly at work before their eyes. It was to them a good power. The desert was the evil one, hence developed the main part of their faith, embodied in the allegory of the burial of Osiris in the sacred stream, whence he rose once a year to scatter blessings over the earth. This modified their ideas of death and life. As to the disposal of their dead, they couldn't dream of consigning their dead to the waters, which were too sacred to receive any but the incorruptible body of Osiris. There were boundary rocks and caves which became sacred to the dead. After the accumulation of a few generations of corpses, it became clear how much more extensive was the world of the dead than that of the living. As the proportion of the living to the dead became, apparently, smaller and smaller, the state of the dead became a subject of proportionate importance to them, until their faith became engrossed with the idea of death and the preparation for it. The unseen world became all in all to them, and the visible world and the present life of little more importance than the necessary introduction to the higher and the greater. Firstly, the letters from Florence Nightingale to her family, so very positive, very light. The last extract is from a book by Harriet Martineau, which tries to analyse a little more the river and the importance of the river to the people. Thank you.
Yes,
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
of course, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when did Florence Nightingale write those letters? What stage of her life was it? Was it famous then?
1849.
Was it before the Crimean War?
Yes.
Right.
Just before, it was 3 years before the Crimean War. Correct me if I'm wrong.
1854.
Just before. And of course, although she wrote very light-hearted letters, her diary was full of angst and torment, and because she was convinced that she had been summoned by God, called by God in some way, but nothing had happened. So it's quite interesting timing. Mm-hmm.
Would anybody else like to ask a question?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. That's wonderful.
Hands creeping up
Yes,
my-
of course, yes.